Good morning, Rodney.
Good morning.
Well, this incredible recruiting haul for Alabama for the class of 2019 continues. On Friday, Antonio Alfano, one of the most athletic defensive linemen in the class of 2019 from New Jersey, long thought to be a Penn State lean, but that changed with a recent visit to Alabama. He commits to Alabama. He's the 13th commitment of this class, all 4 or stars or higher. Tell me what Alabama is getting in this talented young man.
Well, Gary, I think what they're getting when you look at him is a really a freakish athlete. At 6'4", 285 pounds. I think he's been timed legitimately at 4'8". I know he's actually been timed as fast as 4'6'7" when he was a little bit lighter. But 37-inch vertical jump. He's got a motor. I think the thing that really stood out to me about him was the things that he says that he was looking for, that wanted. He kind of embraced what it takes to play at Alabama. And I think that's the key. Not only does he have the talent and the skills and all of those things to be developed into a great player, but I think he has the right mindset. So I think that was to me, and I wrote this in a piece on Tighter Insider, he just seemed to be a great fit for what Alabama does and how they do things.
You knew that defensive line was going to be a priority in this class, and clearly so far, I mean, they are hitting home runs with Antonio Alfano, DJ Dill, Rashad Cheney, some other rush types that could play possibly linebacker or defensive end. That's where this program's been built, going back to when Saban got here in 2007. And for all the skill people that have been brought in, all the talent in terms of athletic ability, that's where Alabama wins football games. When you look at this class and on the offensive line as well, it's shaping up potentially, Rodney, as one of the best he's had. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think I said last week on your show that I thought that they would have the number one offensive line and defensive line classes in the country, based on early indications. Now, again, it's a long way away. We'll see what happens. This is May. A lot of things change between now and December sometimes with some of these kids. But I think right now, if you look at it, Alabama's in position to have, like I said, maybe their best offensive line class. Now, again, we're talking about on paper. We're talking about in terms of ratings and so forth. A lot of things go into whether or not these guys pan out eventually. But I think you look at the offensive line, the commitments that they have, Pierce Quick. We've talked about him, Tanner Bowles out of Kentucky. Quick's a 5-star. Bowles is a 4-star player for whatever it's worth. And then, I think Amari Kite, a lot of people think he's a future NFL player out of Alabaster Thompson. He certainly has all the tools you look for. And I think they're in great shape with Clay Webb out of Oxford. They've said that repeatedly. And then also, and by the way, he's a 5-star player. And then I think they're in really good shape and have been in good shape with Darnell Wright out of West Virginia. Now, again, a long way to go for him. He's the number one offensive tackle in the country. But I think they're certainly in good position with him. You sign those guys, then it's hard to say that you haven't had the best offensive line class in the country, and conceivably, when it's all said and done, there could be 4 or 5 stars among that group.
Amazing.
And then on the defensive line, you've mentioned some of those guys, and Alfano obviously is a great pickup. Talked to some people who kind of think reminds him of a young Jonathan Allen in some ways. And, they're in on a lot of other guys. We've mentioned them on your show, the kids out of Mississippi, and Sopsher out of Louisiana, and various ones, Tui Tele out of Honolulu, Hawaii. So they're in on a big group of defensive linemen as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Last year, Rodney, Alabama probably would have liked to have signed a quarterback. It didn't happen. Of course, you had Jalen Hurts as a sophomore and Tua Tagovailoa as a freshman. Of course, Mac Jones on the roster as well. So it made quarterback recruiting for this class an absolute priority. How big is it, do you think, that they've already gotten 2 commitments, pretty much wrapped up their quarterback recruiting with Tua Tagovailoa, Paul Tyson, both in-state guys, both highly rated national recruits, who are also helping to generate buzz and recruit in this class, to already have your quarterback recruiting wrapped up for 2019 and not have to worry about it? How big do you think that is?
Well, it's always big. I think these quarterbacks make their decisions fairly early. So Alabama's fortunate that they had 2 guys in the state that were high-quality prospects, and that always helps, and it's tough to get, 2 quarterbacks in the same class that are really that highly regarded. But, Alabama has both committed right now. And then, there's another kid, the Bo Nix kid. So the point is, what a great year for quarterbacks in Alabama, when you look at the 2019 class.
No doubt about it. And Alabama's got 2 of them already committed. Let's talk about this team. Of course, as Coach Saban talked about, this is the time between the end of the semester and summer conditioning has not yet started. We saw Coach Cochran take a group of guys down to a leadership academy down at IMG. We know some guys are going home. I had an interview that was sent to me by KNVE TV out of Monroe last week with Isaiah Buggs from Louisiana. And Tua got to go home to Hawaii, was honored with a hometown hero parade over the weekend. He also spoke, as we know now, in the well-documented speech to his old basically middle school. I don't know if that's a term they exactly use, but he said to the kids that he would have transferred had he not played in that national championship game. Now, again, we don't know for sure. I'm sure Alabama would try to kept him, but were you surprised that he admitted that?
Well, no, because the point wasn't that he would have transferred. The point was he was trying to get across to the kids was the perseverance, and I think the story's been twisted around to focus on what he said about he would have considered transferring. His point was that he got down during the season. I don't think that's really something that's unusual for these guys. I remember shortly after the national championship game, and it didn't get a lot of play, Gary, but the San Francisco Chronicle ran a story with people like coaches and the principal at Najee Harris's old high school who said, when he came back in October, he told them he was going to transfer.
Right.
So that's not unusual when you're talking about highly recruited players that come in and, maybe are playing behind someone. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel maybe. And that's probably some of what Tua went through, here with a young quarterback that was in front of him that had success in terms of winning games. And, you realize that maybe it's going to be difficult to unseat, the guy in front of you. So I don't think that that's really unusual.
Speaking of Najee, because like Tua, he had some late season success that might have turned his his mindset around a little bit. But I thought, quite frankly, going into the postseason, that Damian Harris would probably go to the NFL. He did not. So he's back as an incumbent back. 2,000-yard seasons back-to-back. You've got Josh Jacobs, who was banged up during the spring, but clearly is a specialty running back that can do a lot of things. And Brian Robinson, he's biting at the bit. You think Najee did enough toward the end of the season? You think he's going to be content with his role this year, whatever it may be?
Oh, yeah. I think certainly when you look at his opportunity, Bo Scarborough's gone now. He brings that physical, he can do it all, but he's a big physically strong kid like Brian Robinson, as you mentioned. And I think there's a role for all of them. I mean, certainly you've got to have running backs. You never know when injuries can happen. But I think Najee Harris's role is going to be much more significant. He had a great practices leading up to the Clemson and Georgia games, and then we saw him get the opportunity against Georgia in the fourth quarter, second half, did so well. So I expect his role to probably be expanded this year. They're going to certainly need him with Damian, and also you mentioned Brian Robinson. Hopefully Josh Jacobs will be healthy because he gives them a different versatile look there at running back and also as a receiver. So, I think there's certainly going to be opportunities for Najee Harris this year.
Obviously, Rodney, this is Nick Saban's football team, and you come to Alabama, you work for Nick Saban, and he has got a itinerary and a master plan, no doubt about it. But he does allow his coaches to coach. he does allow his coordinators to have input. And now 2 brand new coordinators. Granted, they were both on the staff, but Mike Locksley moves up on offense, Tosh Lupoi on defense. Let's start with offense. You look back at Locksley, he had some teams that could really run the football. He's been here, though, and worked under both Lane Kiffin and Brian Dable. What, if anything, do you think will be different about this Alabama offense under Mike Locksley from what we've seen in the past?
Well, I think what's always different about it, maybe an offense, would be playing to the strengths of the guys you put on the field, and that always changes a little bit. That would certainly change if, the quarterbacks, depending on what that situation is, because they have similar strengths in some ways, but, obviously there's some differences too. So I think, we saw in the second half, for example, in the Georgia game where Alabama was a little more reluctant maybe to throw the ball in the first half. They ran the football more. They used the quarterback on runs more. And in the second half, the way the game kind of unfolded, and they used Tua more in terms of, opening the offense up. So I think it all depends on, which direction they go and playing to the strengths. But we certainly know this, that this offensive line should be really good when they finally get it all, pieced together, because they have some very talented guys. I think it's going to be one of the better offensive lines in the last few years. And with those running backs, Gary, that they have, and the tight ends and all of those things, they're going to be a tough team to stop running the football. I just think, these teams that they play throughout the season are going to really be, I don't know if outman's the word to say it, but it's going to be very difficult, I think, to slow Alabama down running the football. With that said, you have, some skilled people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you want to spread the ball around. You want to use those receivers that you have, all those young players, and the quarterback who can throw it. So I think it's probably going to be really diverse. But I think, again, we get back to the, the strengths of the team and also the ability to run the football.
On defense, we think about it so much with players transferring, but Tosh Lupoi is a gifted recruiter, has done an unbelievable job every place he's been, including here. Intense coach. But I don't think there's any doubt that he was in demand, and with Jeremy Pruitt leaving, he was able to use that to his benefit to get this defensive coordinator position, because Alabama wanted to keep him. Nick Saban wanted to keep him. But Nick Saban has not been shy, Rodney, about saying he's never called a defense, and that I, meaning Saban as the head coach, am going to have more of a role this year because I've got a guy who's never called a defense. How do you think that's going to correlate? And when Nick Saban says he's going to have more of a role in the actual calling of the defense, what do you think he means by that?
Well, I really don't know. Again, he's had the influence that he had with Kirby Smart for all those years. Kirby just kind of basically knew, I think, what to do. He knew what Saban would expect. And, same thing with Jeremy Pruitt the last few years, who obviously came up under Nick Saban. So it's a little bit different this year. Tosh Lupoi's only been in the system a few years, 3 or 4 years now, I think. I can't remember exactly, but worked a few years under Kirby and then, the last couple under Jeremy Pruitt. So he's had an opportunity to grow in the system, no question about that. But his experience in terms of calling a defense is obviously not there right now. So I think it'll be interesting to watch. That's one of the things that I think will be interesting to watch throughout the early part of the season, and to see how much maybe Nick Saban's involved. But, again, you have some other guys there with the experience of calling a defense. It could be very, very helpful to Tosh Lupoi, too. Pete Golding did a great job at UT San Antonio. We've talked about that many times. How he improved that defense. And so, I think it's going to be a collaborative effort there on the defensive side. And that Nick Saban, that defense will be on the same page.
Yeah, one thing, too, if you've ever watched Tosh Lupoi coach the way we have during practice, he does not lack intensity. He will get after him. There's no doubt about that, much like Smart, much like Jeremy Pruitt. Nick Saban is about to go into his 12th season, showing no signs of slowing down. You and I have talked about this a lot. It was a different time in 2007. The internet wasn't near what it is now, and still to some degree there was a little more mystery. But you and I kind of had you particularly, some inside scoop on the fact that Saban was coming, and we were saying that when a lot of people said, no way, it'll never happen, not in a million years. Then when he got here and had the quick success, all the talk about leaving and Texas and NFL and so forth. Now he's about to go in his 12th year. He's already the longest tenured coach since Coach Bryant. How many people do you think would have, if you'd have, and I know you're not a gambler and I'm not either, but percentage-wise, when Saban took this job, would have ever thought he would do 10 years, much less 11 going into 12 as the head coach at Alabama based on his history of moving around and based on the shape this program was in when he got here?
Well, I think given that the longest duration post-Bryant had been, 7 years?
7 years with Stallings, yeah.
Stallings. I guess if you say the odds, wouldn't have favored going over 7 years. But he got settled in. I think Alabama was fortunate enough to get him at the right time in terms of where he was in his career. I think Alabama, he said up front that when people questioned whether he would stay for a while, he said he would be here as long as Alabama was willing to do the things that it took to play at a championship level. I think that's basically paraphrasing what he said. And Alabama's certainly done its end of the bargain, and I think that he has obviously kept his word. Been a lot of rumors. I don't know that anything's ever really come close to him really seriously considering leaving. I don't know that. But I do know this. It's been a great fit for both, and it's worked out well. Did I think he would stay here 12 years or longer, however long his career ends up? I think we've gone far enough in terms of gone farther than I expected. But I'll say this too, Gary. The expectations were, could he get Alabama up back in as a perennial, top 5 type team? And think about that. Just think about that. Just winning a national championship would have been something that initially would have really just excited people to get one. And 5 and 9 years is just it's beyond incredible.
Oh, it is. And that's why I wanted to make that point as we visit with Rodney Orr. It's so phenomenal. And it's the biggest thing I think he's done, Rodney, and you and I track him all the time from Perkins to Curry to Stallings to Dubose, Franchione, Mike Price, Mike Shula. And Coach Stallings had a great line. They love Coach Bryant, and they just tolerate the rest of us. And I think all those coaches, even Coach Stallings, coached under the shadow of Coach Bryant. And I know that time has passed, but he has been able to make this his program, not just currently, but in an iconic way. He has removed that shadow. People still love Coach Bryant, and they always will. But Nick Saban has made a mark unlike you could have ever imagined any other coach being able to do here at Alabama, with the shadow of Coach Bryant being what it was. As good as he's been, Rodney, we expect him to be. No one could have ever dreamed you would see what he has done here with this program. I don't think you could have ever imagined this level of success. Like you said, fans were just dying to get back in the national championship hunt and win one. And now it's just the expectation. I say all that because you and I discussed this. The fans don't take it for granted. It's going to end at some point. I don't think anytime soon, but it won't always be this way. So savor it, enjoy it while it's happening.
Yeah, for people who haven't been through it, living through the later 60s and watching Alabama and then also through the 70s, obviously, what a great run. I never thought at that time, being young, you just never could envision Coach Bryant not being a part of it, and that if he did, it would, you kind of thought, well, they would continue on. And then, there's been some rough times. Obviously through the years, but it's not. And I mean, it's not something that's guaranteed. It is something that's extraordinarily special. Listen, no other school in the country has ever experienced what Alabama's experiencing now. And I say that the run in the 60s and 70s when Alabama was the team of the decade, both of those, time frames, that was as dominant throughout that up to that point as it had been. To be able to experience, Coach Bryant, the run that he had, and then to have Nick Saban, I mean, it's just, you almost say, how can one school, and listen, there was Wallace Wade, who had, 3 national championships. There was Frank Thomas. And, there's been other great coaches that we forget to mention that have won national championships. Obviously, Gene Stallings in 1992. But, to be able to experience Bear Bryant and Nick Saban, people want to debate who's the greatest of all time. My question is, why? What does it matter? I mean, they both were great, at their times. And, Nick Saban's obviously still got a little left in him.
Yeah, he's got some fuel in the tank. It's he knows how to conserve his fuel. Finally, I saved the best for last for you because I know growing up in the state of Texas and you had a strong dislike for the University of Texas. Coach Bryant could never beat them. Some weird games that.
Well, no, that's part of it. There, it's not that he couldn't beat them. It's that how they whine a lot out there about Colt McCoy, but they had some really strange games with Alabama.
Absolutely.
Joe Namath scored to win the game in the Orange Bowl, and they didn't call it a touchdown. That's pretty obvious. Alan Lowry stepped out of bounds in the 73 Cotton Bowl, and they didn't call it. It ended up being a crucial deal. So, anyway, I say all that to say, that was the frustrating part, was the fact that there were so many what I considered controversial games. But go ahead.
I know you're hyped that this home-and-home series in 22 and 23 is coming up, 22 in Austin, 23 in Tuscaloosa, and it's close enough that I still think Nick Saban will be coaching. In fact, I think he wants to coach through those games, and it's not 10 or 12 years off. It's just right around the corner. How excited were you when you saw that series signed and just 4 years away?
Well, again, I love to see it. Like to see Alabama play in Austin. Love to see Texas come play here. So I think that's a great deal. I do wish it was a little bit sooner, simply because, and I do agree with you. I do think Nick Saban will still be going, but I wish the Notre Dame games were sooner, because I know Alabama should be very, very good over the next 2 or 3 years, and as long as Nick Saban's here. But I would love to beat Texas a couple of times and Notre Dame and kind of get those games. Notre Dame's the same way. Had some really strange games that kind of went against Alabama, and we want to even those records out a little bit.
Great stuff, as always, from Rodney Orr, RodneyTiderInsider.com. It may be what we call the off-season a little bit, but there's never any downtime at Tider Insider.
Yeah, TiderInsider.com. It's only $48 a year. Get instant access with your credit card right now. And, again, it's only $48 a year. Gary, I kind of had to laugh because I looked on a Texas A&M board, and they're already talking about that Alabama-Texas, those Texas matchups. And they're it's amazing. They're all in Alabama's corner, even though they're an opponent of Alabama's in the West. They just despise Texas. It's hilarious.
Yep, it is. Great stuff as always, Rodney. I'll see you on Tider Insider TV tomorrow night.
Okay, thanks.